But today I have the pleasure of moderating our panel on the topic of diversity and inclusion. Or at Lumina, we like to talk about valuing diversity. That's usually how we refer to it, but that's also another way of saying inclusion. We often talk about equality, diversity, inclusion, or diversity, equality, inclusion, or equity rather than equality. There's so many different ways that we can phrase it. We can call it D&I, EDI, DEI. Lots of different corporate speak for what we're saying is actually how do we value individuals is what I think we're saying. How do we give people a chance to be themselves? How do we give people a chance to reach their potential, to show their talents, to be part of whatever game they want to be part of. So that's hopefully the kind of thing we're going to be talking about. And beyond that, what's the role of Lumina in that, right? What's the role of our products in that? What's the role of you, our practitioners, in that, in supporting, valuing diversity? Often in organizations, many of us work in that context, but maybe in the community and in other contexts as well. So, our panelists, we have Kat, Tao, and Nguyen, and as she said, she goes by Kat Tao or Tao, not Kat. And she is our Lumina partner for Vietnam. So she is out in Vietnam supporting practitioners, working with clients there, but also she is strongly connected to Australia, and you'll tell us about that. But so you also do a lot of work with clients in Australia and very much working in the area of diversity and inclusion, and would it be fair to say with a special interest in inclusion of racial minorities? And we have Julie Nelson, who is one of our Lumina practitioners here in the UK. And Julie also has an interesting story that she can share for you. But she runs her own consulting business, and one of the key focuses of that is working with women and supporting them in their careers within organizations. And that's extended to, and you can tell us more about this, but extended to also then working with women outside of that organizational context in the community, really supporting women in giving them the confidence to reclaim their place maybe in society and in organizations. Yeah. And finally, we have Mark van Enkevoort, who is another of our practitioners based in the Netherlands. So thank you for coming all the way to the UK, and although not quite as far as Tao, but given how things are with transport at the moment, probably doesn't matter where you're coming from, it still takes just as long to get here, right? So, and Mark works within the Dutch Tax Authority of all places, within the Ministry of Finance in the Netherlands. But his real passion is around LGBTQI inclusion, and he's the chair of a couple of organizations in relation to that, and he's making huge differences within the civil service in the Netherlands in terms of LGBTQI inclusion. So, that's all I'll say about them. I'll let them say something about themselves. So I thought I would start by just inviting each of you to just say something about your personal story, because I know each of you has a personal story that informs why you're passionate about this topic and why this is something you actually do on a day-to-day basis in your professional as well as your personal lives, right? That it's important to you. So, Tao, do you want to start us off? And I know you've got a slide that you wanted to share, so I can bring that up.
Hello? Yes. Okay, so hi everybody. I just only have one slide, and I just wanted to have some images to share with you about my story, my family story, which informs the work that I do today. So I come from my family comes from a landlocked province in Vietnam called Tây Ninh province on the border of Cambodia. And when the war ended, my dad was put in a prison camp, and they were persecuted because they were on the losing side of the war. And my mother was a law student, but had to work in the rice fields. We lost everything. From 1975, when the country was reunited after the Civil War, 1 million people left the country by boat, but a very, very small few went by foot, crossing Vietnam into Cambodia through the killing fields at that time, which was the Khmer Rouge regime that slaughtered a third of the population, and then crossed into Thailand. They crossed into the most heavily mined landmass per square kilometre in the history of the world, which was the Thai-Cambodia border. My mother was pregnant with me, and there's a 12-month-old baby, my older brother. And it was, a horrendous journey. When we got to the refugee camp run by the UN, there were no doctors, nobody there. My mother lay on the ground and gave birth to me, 2 months premature. There was a lot of mass killings at the time. And those pits that you see in the first image, those are actually mass graves that have grown over today. And the second image is of the image of my family in the refugee camp in Thailand, and they were extremely happy to sort of be safe, but we lost one family member. And I took about 7 years to write this book, and part of it was the journey that my family left, but also growing up as a refugee. I arrived as a baby, but we grew up in extreme poverty. So this other image of me and my brother, behind us are some sort of 2 sewing machines. You can't see it, but I grew up in a sweatshop. So my mother operated, this sweatshop from our home so that she could be close to us, didn't know any English. And so there's this law student, and then my dad, who was French-speaking economist, went to work in the factories. So this was the landscape of my childhood. And when I was researching for this book, there were not a lot of information on the people that had left by foot in this way, who were Vietnamese refugees. And I found out that of the people that left by boat, 50% died. But of the people that went by foot, 90% died. So, my mum, throughout my life, at key points, reminds me that, we are the 10%. And so, what is a meaningful life? How can we be of service? Ultimately, getting out of poverty, I became a corporate lawyer, worked in private equity. I was a CEO. I set up Ernst & Young's law firm in Vietnam. But then, I felt that I wasn't fulfilling the promise of being the 10%. So I left and started a business in, leadership development, but focusing on inclusive leadership. Really informing from my life story, but also my corporate experience, running P&Ls, working for a $5 billion company as chief strategy officer, and all of those things. And so today, there's work that I do in Australia as a strategic alliance, and that's the work around inclusive leadership. So I have 2 main things that I'm doing. One is a broad inclusive leadership program, and that is not sort of subject focused. So we use different case studies as a lens to build a mindset around, how do we live? It's not about how do we get there. It's not about numbers. It's about how do we live and embody the values and the legacy that we want to leave on this earth. And so it's, one of my clients, I've done 600 executives, that have run through this program, and it's very much a take of not looking at symptoms, but looking at structures. And really helping people to wrestle with very complex, once you go down into it, very complex understandings of what is equity, what is merit. We think we understand diversity, but once I create these conditions for people to wrestle with it, it's a very limited and cosmetic understanding of diversity. And the second program that I run, as Marae had mentioned, is a sort of like a masterclass 8-month racial justice leadership program. And what we do is we take a few people of colour who are emerging talent in an organisation, and then we have white sponsors, because the reality in Australia statistically is 97% of all of our leadership in every single sector is white. And so we deliberately take our white sponsors, and they go through a life-changing experience. And I just wanted to finish this first intro by sharing some quotes with you. So at the end of the program, for the people of colour, Black, Indigenous people, people of colour, it's a program of healing racial trauma. And this is some of the quotes. I will always reflect on this part of my personal and professional journey as an inflection point to me realizing that I am enough, I am a leader, and I am whole. I am no longer ashamed. I have learned to love myself. I am equal and I am healed. And from the white executive sponsors, our organisation is not a safe space for everyone. Even good people can be racist. I now truly understand what white privilege means. I am part of a racist construct, and therefore at times I have not demonstrated my values, which equate to being anti-racist. I will make it a lifelong commitment to be anti-racist. I want to change the world because I want to change it for you, when he talks about his sponsor. I feel extremely challenged but inspired to be a different person. So.
Wow. Thank you so much, Tao, for sharing that fascinating and really personal story. I'm sure it's a really moving story, and how you drew that thread for us from where you've come from, where your family's come from, to finding meaning and purpose in your life and extending that through the work you do. Thank you so much. Julie, tell us about your story.
Thank you for that. It was really interesting hearing, and it always, I suppose...
Julie, a bit closer.
A bit closer?
Yeah.
Okay. That's not... I'm usually told I'm quiet. Yeah, so it never ceases to amaze me that when we talk about diversity, how different stories can be and how it impacts on people very differently, but no less meaningful. And as we've talked about, I work predominantly with women at all different levels. So I'm an executive coach and a leadership coach. And I also work with organisations to support their strategy to help women progress through the organisation into leadership posts. And also work very closely in the community with women that I call the forgotten women, because at times I found that I was in that camp. The forgotten women that had either had a career and had to give that career up because of responsibilities, whether they be caring for parents, becoming a parent themselves, or looking after family members, or ill health. You know, there's a lot of ladies I work with that have given good jobs up because of anxiety and stress, and don't have the confidence to step back into the world, if you like, the real world. And so I do community work as well, work through either funding or reaching out to my network, which I'm fortunate to have quite a wide network of professionals that will come in and deliver some free training to help the women that are out in the community. So that's sort of a little bit about what I do, but I suppose it's always interesting to hear, how did I get to that place? You know, so Julie, who is Julie? You know, who's an insight to my world? And Julie, probably 10 years ago, was a Julie that was just going with the flow. You know, whatever happens, you know, if I got a post, if I got promoted, I was really grateful. It was great, yeah, I'll go with that. So just kind of living life, and I was really happy, laugh a lot, and all of that. And my life changed overnight, huge. And I have to say, I mean, you may well think, how did you not know? But it did change overnight when I became a mom to twin boys. And it was like, oh, wow. Nobody told me about all of this, how things would change. And because I literally had a plan that, just drop these babies and back to work, it'll all be the same. But of course it wasn't. And what I realised at that point was, I suppose in hindsight, as I look back, I probably had postnatal depression and wasn't aware of it. And I don't mean a fleeting, I mean for probably a good couple of years, because I struggled to find my place in the world and find out who I was, because I was so focused on getting back to where I was, rather than looking at where I am now and where I need to go going forward. And I stayed in that place for a good couple of years, fighting to get back to Julie, fighting to do what I was able to do before. So being in a senior leader's post and expecting that I still need to be able to do all of that and do all of this. And just doing it. So not looking after myself physically or mentally. And the point that things changed for me was it was quite significant, quite scary. And apologies if this is a trigger for anyone, but I literally found myself in an acute, life-threatening position in a high dependency unit. And that was my pause. You know, I had time to stop and think, oh my goodness gracious, what on earth are you doing? And what do you actually stand for? And having a strong people focus and sort of, it was like, who else feels like this? You know, and what can I do to raise awareness to that? So, and that was how my organisation was born. But to take it further, I developed a programme which I call Be You. And it's about helping women to find themselves, the new you. And it's all designed around everything that I could have used and everything that I needed at in those 2 or 3 years where I was lost and didn't know I was lost at all. So, so I designed the programme around that. But I also wanted to reach out to women that perhaps hadn't had the courage to go back to work and were in that same spot. So I designed another programme, which is, again, the BU Women's Returners Programme, which I managed to get funded and delivered to women living in London for free. So there was nothing that could stop unless, you know, it was about travelling. But then I moved it online to make it easier for women across London. So, yes, and Lumina fits in there really well for me because it really is about valuing yourself and being brave enough to be yourself and recognise that we can change over time. So the everyday bit that everyone sees might not actually be what you want to be. You know, because I carried a whole load of labels: mom, wife, sister, daughter, you know, leader. And all of those came with a huge amount of expectations. And on reflection, I realised that a lot of my life had been responding to the expectations of others. And it gets to a point where you get completely lost. So I deliver a 4-month programme that focuses on some really key pillars, but it's really about sort of being aware, being curious, you know, and being focused and thinking about what is it that you want to get, what's your preference, you know, and what do you like and what don't you like. You know, I tell them the story that I love cabbage. I mean, I do. I love cabbage. I mean, you might think, what's that? I love cabbage. But I hadn't ate cabbage for years because no one in my house liked cabbage. And I was like, actually, why do I not cook cabbage? You know, I don't care if anybody else doesn't like it. So I'm going to cook cabbage. And honestly, in my house, why are you cooking that? We don't like it, but I like it. And you don't have to eat it. And I'm delighted to say that one of my sons does like cabbage, so now we do eat cabbage together, which he didn't know that he'd liked cabbage. And I thought to myself, what else am I giving up? What else am I letting go of because everybody else expects me to do that, or actually I'm doing it to myself? So some of the feedback, and I've just finished a cohort, so some of the feedback's fresh in my mind. And one of the ladies, which almost brought me to tears, last week said to me, the programme and the Lumina Spark profile together was like a personal X-ray that looked inside and helped her realise what was going on internally for her and what her preferences are, what she's strong at, and giving her the courage to know what really is going on inside so she can start to show it externally. And that's really, really powerful. And when you see women that have been in the same job for 17 years and actually turning up at the programme without taking their coat off and not making eye contact for the first 2 sessions, and then coming to the 3rd session dressed in a beautiful pink dress and kind of like, who are you? What is going on? And having an interview and changing their role as a result of having that pause. So our pause is very different for each other, but you know what I try to do is help women to pause, whether it's as a group or as an individual. So that's my story.
Thanks, Julie. And some of you will know I have 2 small children as well, and I can really relate to that. You kind of know what it's going to be like, but nothing really prepares you for what it's really like to have children, to really go back to work and juggle all of that. So, yeah, thank you. Mark.
Well, I'm quite impressed by your stories, Tao and Julie. I think my story will be slightly shorter, but and completely different. I grew up in a small village in Holland, in the south of Holland, religious surrounding, a religious community, and I didn't grow up to be myself. I didn't know how to do that. I realized that there was something, but I couldn't be myself really. So I got a career, I got married, I got 4 children, and then on a certain point, I was in my 30s, I turned ill and I wanted to be healthy again. I turned ill again mentally. I had a burnout. So I struggled with myself. And then at one point I noticed I have to come out of the closet. This is not who I am. I'm acting. So this is not what I want to do all my life, especially not with 4 children. I don't think it's a good sign for the kids if you do that. So at 36, I came out of the closet. It was a big step. And what happened at work is that I went to my HR manager and I told him my story. And I was just celebrating myself. I came out of the closet to my wife, to my children, to my family. And they were all, really, all very supportive. So I told the HR manager my story, and then his first reaction was, "Thank you for trusting me. I won't tell anyone." So that's when I knew there's something happening here, and there's something to be done. To be honest, the first years I had to rediscover myself, so I was not really active in the community. But then after a few years, I noticed that there's so much to do in our organization. I work for the Ministry of Finance, part of the Dutch government. All the ministries, they all have their own networks. So I joined the network in the Ministry of Finance. I became active there. Now I'm the chair. There's also the alliance of all the networks, and that's called Dutch Government Pride. And we do a lot of work to get people conscious about what's happening. And in Holland, we like to think of ourselves as a very tolerant and inclusive country, but still there's a lot going on. And even a few weeks ago, my own organization, the Ministry of Finance, we have admitted that there is structural, I'm looking for the words now, but there's institutional discrimination going on. And what you see there is that it's very difficult for us within the organization to recognize that, to look at ourselves, and I'm part of this. And I heard it before from that table over there. We don't even know that we are discriminating, but we are. So as organizations, as networks, we work together with Workplace Pride. It's an organization based in Amsterdam. They hold yearly benchmarks. So we measure now, and by measuring we know where we are doing well, where are the blind spots. So we are now working on getting more and more inclusive, and more and more networks join together to join forces to really influence the government. And when you think of it, I would think in a country like Holland, it wouldn't be necessary. But still, there's a lot of work to do. Yeah. I think I'll keep it by that.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, thank you. And thank you to all of you for standing here and sharing your personal stories with us. I think that's really valuable. And clearly, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, something that I've been reflecting on is that there's the abstract level, or there's the level at which we talk about, are we including racial minorities? What are we doing to support women? Are we including LGBTI? All the other forms of groups, you know, that we sometimes name, but it's a very abstract level sometimes, right? So to turn it into personal stories and individual experiences is also a really important part of thinking about inclusion, isn't it? So thank you so much for that. There's just one thing that I wanted to get your take on, Mark, because I know this is something that you had mentioned around, and I was also reminded in that conversation from that table around where talk around diversity and inclusion meets the real world, meets geopolitics, meets all these things happening. And one thing that we sometimes also meet is different social movements, political movements. Sometimes you mention this idea of like, oh, is this about being woke? Is this about being politically correct? You know, so unpack that for me. What are we talking about versus, you know, how does that relate to these ideas about being woke or politically correct or whatever else is going on?
Well, what I mentioned happened a few weeks ago. I was giving a workshop for a small team, and it's a small location. And we have been struggling to raise the rainbow flag on 2 occasions per year. 17th of May, it's IDAHOT, International Day Against Homo and Transphobia. And on the 11th of October, we have Coming Out Day. It's international date. So we wanted the rainbow flag to be raised. It took us a couple of years to get that into the protocol. It's government, we have protocols, so it's kind of difficult to change that. But it happened like 3-4 years ago. And now all the government buildings have to raise the rainbow flag on those 2 dates. So I was on this really small location, a little bit, it's where we keep the firework that is being taken by the police. So it's illegal firework. It's put away, very safe, very in the countryside. So there's no one there, only the rabbits and so on. But so I was looking at the flag. They had a flag there. So I asked the team, "Do you also have a rainbow flag here?" A rainbow flag. Why that? Because it's in the protocol that on 2 dates per year you should raise the rainbow flag. Well, never thought about it. And then one of the colleagues all of a sudden said, "Is this about being woke?" And I didn't know what to say at first, because woke, I don't consider myself like being part of that movement, and I don't know if it's a movement at all. But so we had a discussion about that. I think raising the rainbow flag is not meaning that you're woke. And when you look at the woke movement, I think also there some people tend to be not inclusive. And we had a discussion about what's happening in some communities. And I think the rainbow flag for me is a symbol of everyone belongs. Everyone has a role. Everyone deserves to be to be themselves and to be with others. So it's not about excluding, it's about including. So what you see, sometimes people are thinking of canceling people, all that thing on social media. So that's not my kind of stuff. So we had a good discussion about it. For me, the rainbow flag is not a symbol of the woke movement.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing there is that it's also about conversation and dialogue.
Always, always.
Always, yeah. Thank you. Tao, I wanted to ask you, from your experience of having worked in Vietnam, having worked in Australia, some of you know I'm from Japan, I've worked in Japan, I've worked here. You know, sometimes when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, the things that are at the forefront of our focus in terms of who we're focusing on trying to include, you know, the conversations we're having are slightly different. The kind of support you get from organizations or what's on the agenda is different. So I was interested in your take on how it compares between somewhere like Australia, between somewhere like Vietnam. And I don't know if you have any take on how that looks in Europe or in the UK, the US.
Well, first of all, it's such an honor. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. So, look, and I sort of want to reflect on the woke and politically correct, idea as well. I guess like I hop on a plane, so I sort of live in between Australia and Vietnam. So I hop on a plane and I become a visible majority overnight, like 8 hours, and also an income elite in Vietnam. And then 8 hours later, I'm a visible minority and, I'm not income elite anymore. And I grew up in public housing and all that stuff. And so, when I'm in Vietnam, the idea of privilege really you're so easily forgotten that you actually are privileged because you're part of something that is a standard, that is a normed way of being that is reflected everywhere. So the magazines, the TV, the political elite, everyone looks like me. And you're so easy so that, your quest for justice and fairness and for everybody, no matter how they identify, and they feel that they can belong, it easily becomes an intellectual exercise if you're part of the privileged, normed group. And so I have, I work with different clients and this sort of links back to sort of the keynote, Nick, at the beginning, is learning, how do we get to a point where we independently shift our own behaviour so that we are living differently, And what I have learned is you enter through the mind, but you shift through the heart. And unless these issues touch you in a way that you move from being a spectator of the issue, so it's on TV and I see these people suffering, but till you become a witness. When you become a witness, the proximity of the issues is closer to you, which is why I designed the program where I match the sponsor with the sponsee, who is a person of colour, using the Lumina profile. So we match people with their cognitive opposites, psychological opposites, but they have a journey together so that as they travel together, and each of the sessions is guided by discussion that you normally wouldn't have. So these sponsors tell me, I work with people of colour. I work with people of colour who are gay, who are women, and in my program there are people who identify as bisexual, and they have all backgrounds, and these issues are compounding their existence. So they're like, well, but I never have deep trusting relationships with these people where it hurts me that they are suffering. And so when we bring the issues close to them, they can't be the same again. And then they become a witness. And the second stage of the program is we shift them from being a witness to a change agent. And this is where the inclusive leader mindset comes in my broad program, which has got nothing specifically on any particular subject like race or anything, is about we go from saying, oh, I'm not sexist, I'm not homophobic. If someone says, oh, you just did that thing and that's not cool, to saying, how do we define this? And how do I embody this? How am I perpetuating systems of inequity without even knowing it? So it's not saying, I don't actively discriminate, to moving to the inclusive leader that says, why do I have the opportunities that I have? And who else doesn't have the same opportunities? So for all of the, I guess, the people that come into my program, we get them to sort of, you know, understand and wrestle with the issues. But they also, now this is sort of, I think, a take that I don't, so what I bring into the program is your self-worth. Do you have shame that you're carrying around? Because if you do, and you're sort of perfectionist, you're exhausted all the time, you know, you're doing all these things and you're deriving your worth from external sources, you cannot be a really good ally in any respect. Because what happens is on your journey to being a, you know, living justice and being a role model for your children and all this stuff, if someone says something to you, how do you respond? Self-righteous. Oh, but I'm on that committee. How can I be, you know, homophobic? My son is gay. How dare you say that? My wife is black. You know, we get this. So there's this sort of defensiveness, massive. And then there's like, oh, you know what? You should be grateful that I'm even on this. And so there's a short term, oh, forget it. I'm going to withdraw. I can't handle being with discomfort. I can't handle. I don't have the grace, the worthiness to lean in and to actually create inclusive spaces. And leaders need to be able to get to that space in order to really lead change. So the program, the inclusive leadership program that I do has to intersect with that real personal human that shows up and that quest, so that you then become a real ally that you know, this world needs to be more equitable.
Thank you. Yeah, lots there for us to. You may ask a question, but you have to wait for a mic first, please.
So thank you, Tai. I totally understand the approach you take, but I also feel that you ask those people that are in your program to do a lot, as when they go really towards their deepest stuff, like shame and others, that could be really bringing up all the trauma of their life. So I think it's somehow fantastic and it's so needed. But I think I could imagine that, you know, some people just hide away because they do not want to go to that vulnerable place where they have to face their own deepest wounds. How do you experience that with leaders?
Thank you for that great question. When we do transformative work and not intellectual work only, we sometimes necessarily invite that, you know. And because, you know, we have to, unfortunately, you know, a lot of the things that we find, you know, unjust and unfair in the world, it continues because people are not willing to sort of, you know, confront and look in a mirror and heal, really heal, you know, because your own healing, there are beneficiaries to your own healing because you show up as a different leader, you know. And so out of the 700 for one organisation, I've run this program for 700 people, and now we're going to the next level, which is another 700 executives. And you know what's been really amazing and encouraging, and predominantly white men and the leaders, is that there hasn't been the reaction that I thought, whoa, these people are going to be like. And it's been, and I think this is where, honestly, good design is really important, is extremely important in this type of work, yeah. How do you create psychological safety to allow people to touch that and to give them a guide to go, this is something you need to go deeper if you want to live a life of real integrity and purpose and leave a legacy. And so, and I've learnt from lots of people, I've learnt from mistakes as well. And we also have one-on-one coaching has to be part of it. And we also have like counselling services as well. And people go, whoa, inclusion? And I thought you were just going to give me a to-do list of what to say and not to say. You know, what's current? Give me the language. Give me the terminology. This acronym is expanding all the time. I'm like, you're in for a treat, aren't you? You know. But my response is like to understand that this is required in real transformation, you know, for justice, and that it's good design that actually gives you amazing outcomes. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So you mentioned using Lumina Spark within that, so I'm going to take that as a segue, and I'm going to invite you, Julie, to just talk a bit more, because you mentioned as well about the everyday persona and the connection there. So just tell us a bit more about that role that Lumina Spark plays in this case, helping women to almost reclaim their own identity. So it's about inclusion maybe from others, but it's also about people stepping up on their own as well, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Maybe a bit closer.
Yeah, absolutely. There's obviously you have to be in an organisation that's willing to support the change and recognise that there's a need, and a senior person that is brave enough to really drive through the support for this, and not be one, just what you were saying, Tao, on the outskirts of, well, actually, I've got children and I've done it, so why can't you? You know, and not listening to that individual. So I think there needs to be that realisation that people are different, and just because you may look as if you're in the same situation, it's really important to dive into that individual and prevent that fear or the clove covering the real issue. And where Lumina really helps these ladies is it helps, as they would say in their words, like a mirror, you know, and it helps them to look at themselves, which they don't do very often because they're too busy trying to be what they're expected to be and fitting into their everyday requirements, and it points the gap between the everyday and their underlining could be huge. Which then can have an impact on their mental health, their physical health, which is exactly where it took me. But having that huge gap of trying to fit, trying to be something or someone that doesn't really, it's not authentic.
And Julie, I'm curious, when you say that gap, are there particular qualities that you see showing up as a pattern, or is it very individual?
Quite individual, but there are a few that are quite similar. So giving up power, I like to kind of phrase it, where people give up the red quite often, you know, and the outcome focus because they can't bring that to work, you know, and just turn up the green because that's what I'm supposed to do. And quite recently I worked with, just in the programme that's just finished, there's a lady who's working in a role that is very detailed, very down to earth, and very blue and purple and down there. But actually her profile's completely opposite. And her view was, oh my gosh, now I know that actually I can do this stuff, but I need to be in an organisation or a role that allows me to be creative, because now I realise that I feel like I'm in a box, and I'm suppressed, but I'm just doing it because that's what I think I'm supposed to do. So I think it's very much of a mirror and a reminder, and then almost allowing you to be you, and giving you the narrative to say, this is my preference, and it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, thank you. And Mark, kind of similar question. Do you want to say something as well about how you use Lumina Spark within your organisation towards, you know, inclusion? And maybe that's also a little bit of a trail for your workshop that is coming up next as well.
Okay. Well, let's start with this. Since last November, we are in the program, what we are calling in the organization of the tax authority, the tax department, inclusive leadership. And it was quite hard to convince them that what we are doing is all about inclusion, because I do 4 things at the moment, 4 jobs, and I combine that. So one of them is together with another practitioner, Robert In 't Veld. He's not here, but we started 10 years ago coaching teams with Lumina to have another to create another conversation in the team. So we use Lumina Spark mainly for groups, and just as an instrument to sit back and take time and really see each other again. And just recently, last year, a new book came out, a Dutch writer, a lady, she did research in big companies, and she wrote a book about the dehumanization that's going on in organizations. And it's also in the system of managing the organization. Because when we just manage the organization, we just have one part of the conversation that we need. We don't really connect to each other. So what she says is we need to slow down and we need to reflect. And when I read that book, I thought that this is exactly what we are doing. So now things come together, and we use Lumina Spark to coach teams, to have really slow down workshops to people, to make people aware of each other, to really see each other, and then to be able to connect again. And when you connect, when you have a connected team, high performance teams have to be connected. If you're not connected, you cannot work as a team. So in that way, we use Lumina Spark within a big program. It's all about inclusion. It's all about awareness of being able to put in your talent, and then at the moment it's really strange for me that all these things that I was doing the last years, it comes together in one.
Yeah, and I was just thinking that, because at the one end, you know, Tao, you're talking about kind of justice, right? But you're also working in organizations, right? And Julie, you're talking about helping women with their careers, and you're talking about high-performing teams. And so there is a thing where it can be both, or it is both, right? And many of us, we are working for organizations, or we're consulting for organizations, and so there's always that lens on it of what's the organizational benefit, what's the business benefit, but there's the other side of it, which is where's the justice in this? What is it doing for our world, our society, for human beings as individuals? And so, as you say, it's nice when you say it comes together. And all of those things are pointing in the same direction, yeah. So I'm going to take a quick look at time. Okay.
Could I share how I use Lumina?
Yes, please do. Please do, yes.
And some tips as well. Like,
sure.
You know, okay, so I thought about how I use this in a very practical sense, right? So the first thing in all of our Spark workshops in Vietnam and everywhere is we have this activity. And, you know, some of my clients say that our organization, we do diversity, we don't do inclusion. So we bring in people who are diverse in different ways, but yet when they come into the organization, they feel a pressure to conform to a work style, to whatever way, you know, or it can be even more acute, like they have to drink alcohol when they don't want to. They stop praying if they're Muslim, or they try to hide. They go to the accessible toilet in order to wash their feet, you know, because there's no place for them. So there's all this stuff, and you know, how do we value diversity? And one fun exercise I do is I get people to read the Valuing Diversity page, and it says this is your psychological opposite. So what I do then is I ask the people in the room for the next 5 minutes, use the Splash app or with your Valuing Diversity page as a reference, try and find your psychological opposite in this room. And I say, and then I'm like, so if there is a winning pair, we celebrate them and we give them a round of applause, and then we project their compared Splash app onto a projector, and I do a pair coaching activity with the two of these people with everyone else to go, how would you actually frustrate each other if you had affinity bias? So if you had a preference to gravitate towards people who are like you, How would you see someone who's highly empathetic? Well, you know, as opposed to logical. So then we bring that to life and everyone says, oh, I start to now see that I do this, you know. So that's one activity that I do in every workshop. Now, the second thing is in the Inclusive Leader program, so if we take an organization with 10,000 staff, so one of my clients, they know that the symptom that they can observe is that there's few women, there's few people of colour at the top, and there's a lot of racial diversity and a lot of women at the bottom. And this is very common. And everyone's saying, I'm not sexist, I'm not racist. Why is this happening, right? And so what we do is we take the team view. Okay, so I get the highest leadership in the firm, so it could be like 100 or so people. We do a team view of just them. Then we show them and we say, all right, here's this cluster of everyone's pretty much outcome focused, right? And so I say then, what is the hidden template of success here? You've got criteria to be promoted, but what's the implicit criteria? How do you have to behave? They're like, well, you've got to be really tough, take charge, really extroverted, you know, self-promoting, all this stuff. I said, well, who does that implicitly disadvantage? Well, people who are not. Well, what's that? Well, people who are reflective. They don't speak first. They're observing. They're intimate. Okay. Now then look at which groups in the organisation aren't progressing. So they're like, well, a lot of women aren't progressing. A lot of racial minorities aren't progressing. Then I say, well, when we have feedback, performance review feedback, and they say, and there's a group that actually gets told, you need to speak up more. You need to be more visible. You need to, well, who are they? And they end up being a lot of the racial minorities. And then there's this sort of the idea of different cultural norms. So there's, you know, power distance, you know, in authority, you don't speak first, you have to think a lot. You're taught as a child, I also taught a child, your father is your first authority figure, your parents, you don't just blab whatever you want. You think about what you say. So then there's an inadvertent racial outcome that is different for racial groups. And when we expose that, you know, we then show them the team mandala as a way to actually get them to examine how is the archetype of leadership, a good leader, defined? How is it presented and how is it showing up because of this team view as a good leader, talent? And how is it unintentionally racist and sexist and whatever? And people are like, wow, this is unbelievable. Because they're like, I don't say, you're Chinese, I'm not going to promote you. So what is actually really happening here? And then we start to go deeper and diagnose, where does the embodiment of this idea of a good leader, how is that being perpetuated in all different parts of the firm, in recruitment processes, in using, you know, psychometric tools that actually have, we've discovered with this organisation, a particular tool they use where it filtered out people of colour because it said that they were not emotionally intelligent. But who designed that? And on what standard do we define emotional intelligence? What cultural norms have we used in order to define that and then actually have unintended consequences that happen to be, you know, marginalising certain groups? So I've used the team view in that particular way. Yeah, and then of course in coaching. And I just want to share one last example. So this woman of colour, she changed her name because she felt an Anglo name would get her, you know, because data proves that. And then her hidden treasure was empathy. So she's downplaying her empathy and she's downplaying her name, and she said, if I lose myself, I will succeed. I don't want to embrace who I am because that's what I've learned. So through the coaching, she realised that like empathy is something that I am, but her boss told her empathy is too emotional. Stop being empathetic. And so over this process, using it very similar to Julie, she then challenged her boss. She became so much more confident. Everyone is saying, who is this, you know, person? It's amazing. And then she presented to the board of the entire organisation. And she said, today you call me by my real name. and this is my name. And it was just so emotional. I'm thinking about it, I'm getting emotional.
Yeah. You just reminded me of when you said there was a psychometric they're using that was inherently causing bias. And I remember talking to someone in Japan about a tool that is commonly used or used by most organizations in Japan as part of their recruitment assessment. And he said to me, yeah, you know, it is a really great tool, but, you know, doesn't work on foreigners. Well, are they not human beings, you know? So yeah, this is the kind of thing we're up against, isn't it? And that's why we love Lumina. So we are getting close to time. As always with these panels, we always run out of time and can't ask all the questions we want to ask. But I think maybe we'll take one or two questions, because it would be nice to get some audience input. Question from Julia. And she's even got the mic next to her.
Thank you. Julia Collin, BAE Systems. This probably goes mostly to Julie. We've been successfully piloting an emerging female leaders program. I've been looking after it because I look after talent at BAE. It has met resistance from both women and men that by targeting women, we're creating a victim group. And I know there are strong arguments on both sides here, but I was really interested in your response, Julie, because then I think I could use it back in the workplace.
Did you say your name was Julie as well?
Julia.
Oh,
Julia.
Julia.
Julia. The first thing that comes to mind is who's championed the programme and what is the real purpose. You know, where I've worked with organisations and the programme that I design has been really successful, it has a real purpose. And it also there's different stages. So it's about bringing women right throughout the organisation, rather than, okay, we're going to put this programme on and this one programme will answer all of the issues. So my question would be, how does that programme fit into the wider strategy? What level is that programme for? And how do you bring the women right from the way down, right the way across?
Thank you. And just one more, if I may, really quickly. I'm up next after the coffee break, and I'm going to be really keen for the panellists to be scrutinising what we're talking about, because I feel there may be some implicit bias in what we're talking about. So feel free to scrutinise that for me, please.
Thank you. And a plug for Julia's presentation that's coming up next. Yes. One last question. So we've only got one mic in the audience at the moment, so it's a bit of a way. Thanks, Kamal.
Thank you so much. So thank you very much for everything that you have shared. And we talked about being a woman, sexuality, biases. And I cannot help but think also about neurodiversity. And not only because Dr. Stewart-Dixon is currently doing the research and I am finding myself extremely interested in it, only because I have relatively recently discovered that I'm neurodiverse and I'm still coming to terms with it. As in, oh, I'm not a freak, it's just my brain, that's how it worked. But you covered fitting in, so let me just throw there masking, but also you said challenging. And to me, it feels like it was me against the world all my life. So, and I'm sure that many of you have felt that as well. But with the word challenge, one challenge is that one can only challenge as much. And when not to challenge is the question. And if you're finding yourself in a physical, in an environment with psychological safety, then this is the place to do it. But what do you do when you know for sure that it's not a safe place? And is the solution only to leave and find somewhere that you can be yourself? Or keep pushing and keep being beaten down with the hope that some other people will join you and recognize your efforts. Is there an answer to that question?
Was that, did you want to speak to that? Or what, did you have someone
Yes,
in
please.
particular that you...
No, it's
Mark
it's
has
a
something to say.
general-
And in fact, Mark and I, we had this conversation in which we said, oh, I'm really glad that we got a nice spread in our panel and we're representing kind of different areas of diversity, but I'm also really conscious that there's so many other areas and people are really talking about neurodiversity at the moment. And Mark was like, oh, well, if it comes up, maybe I can speak to that. So Mark's going to speak to it.
Well, we have within the Dutch Tax Authority, a great colleague of mine, 10 years ago, he had the experience that he was how do you call it? He was a talent, and he was supported, and then he discovered that he had ADD, and he talked about it to his manager, and from one moment to the other, he turned from talent into a danger. Exactly that. And that was very frustrating, of course, and what he did, he started a network. And the network has a beautiful name. It's Celebrate Our Differences. That's the name of the network. It's one of our co-networks within the organization. And we were challenged a little more than a year ago by our, how do you call it, Director General, so the highest boss of the tax authority. And he said, what you are doing with Lumina, I really like it. You did it for your own network. I did it for Be Proud, my own network. We had, as a team, we did Lumina Spark sessions and Find Your Why sessions. And then this man, Peter is his name, Peter said, well, what you were doing there is, I like it so much, I want you to do that for the other networks. And that resulted in 4 workshops last year, and we are starting, after the summer we're starting again. Those were the most incredible workshops I had. We had people with high sensitivity, highly intelligent, all kinds of autistic spectrum, all kinds of people in there, brain injury. So it was, we had to slow down more than we are used to. It took 5 workshops instead of 4 to really get the thing and to give people the chance to connect to each other. So, and what I have heard is there are colleagues that were thinking of leaving the organization, but then being part of the network and being supported like this, now I stay. So that is what's happening. I'm very proud of that.
Thank you. Thanks for the question.